Well, you know what? Let's talk about it when we get there. We'll save some good stuff. But do you have any bat interest here? Yesterday, the Cubs ended up producing their fair amount of runs, 12 runs. Really solid night for them, 12-5 win in Great American. Definitely not as easy a matchup today, but I think for me, if I'm going anywhere here, I could reason with Darvish. I don't really like Bauer, but I don't really like hitters in this game that much either, especially with us having 26 other teams to choose from.
Right. I don't love bats here, but it is still a really good park. Bauer struggled the most with lefties this year. So Anthony Rizzo is, I think, an affordable first base option. And then some of the value from the Reds that just has power, Jesse Winker, Josh Van Meter in particular. Darvish has given up a 216 expected ISO to lefties this year. So just, kind of singling out a couple guys that I think are in decent home run spots.
Okay. Kansas City, Detroit Tigers. Brad Keller, Edwin Jackson. Yeah, he's still here, man. He hasn't gone anywhere. And he's got a no-hitter to his name as well. If you just got into baseball and following it and you don't know much about Edwin Jackson, go check out his no-hitter from 5 years ago or so, and he was with the Diamondbacks. Do you remember it?
Yeah, 130 pitches and 6 walks or something.
I think he walked 8.
Yeah.
It's one of the most incredible no-hitters ever. And, he'll always have that to his name. He's probably going to get shit on today, though. I mean, he's made 5 starts. He's pitched 8 games, 8 appearances this season. He's averaging negative fantasy points, Adam. Obviously, I'm not using fantasy points as a benchmark, but when you've made 8 appearances and you've pitched now 28 innings and you're averaging negative fantasy points and your ERA is above 11, bear with me here. Sure, you might see some positive regression, but you're still going to be really bad.
Yeah, and Kansas City is really appealing, I think, for a couple of reasons. Obviously because they're facing Edwin Jackson, but you get those 4 bats at the top of the order. They're actually good with Merrifield, Gordon, Dozier, Soler. Dozier and Soler both have an ISO approaching 300 against right-handed pitching this year. Merrifield is, a good stolen base threat and a good hitter. And then Gordon is an above average hitter who is also inexpensive. But then beyond that, you get to the really bad hitters on Kansas City, but they're all so cheap. Ryan O'Hearn is 2,800. I'll go ahead and take a chance on him against Jackson. Cuthbert's cheap enough. Starling is really cheap. Nicky Lopez is sub 3K on DraftKings. It just makes it really easy to get a high upside stack against a terrible starting pitcher and a bad Detroit bullpen that isn't really a low upside stack at all. Maybe they're lower probability than some other teams that have 5.5 implied run totals, but there is still power. There is speed. So I just think that they're a really cost-effective stack tonight.
All right. Yeah, Goat O'Hearn. I think it's a 2-home run day for him.
Oh, yeah?
Feeling it?
I'm not sure he'll hit the ball twice.
It's but if he does, you can imagine what it would be like, right?
Yeah, I can imagine what it would be like if Ryan O'Hearn hit the ball.
You don't know what that's from? Come on now. Come on.
Not ringing your bell now.
He and her got it on. No,
what?
No, they didn't. What?
What's it from?
Billy Madison.
I've seen
Chris Farley.
I've seen the movie.
No, they didn't. You can imagine what it would be like, right? And he starts elbowing. Oh man. All right.
I have seen the movie though. That's better than most movie references.
It is. It's if this were Manny Laura, he wouldn't even know what that is or who Chris Farley ever. I bet if you asked Manny if he knows who Chris Farley was, he wouldn't. Chris Farley, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
And I also agree Manny probably doesn't.
No, he definitely wouldn't. But he watches live concerts in Fortnite, so he's got that going for him. I love you, Manny. All right, Kansas City and Detroit, outside of pitching, which we have no interest in, and outside of Kansas City bats, do you have interest in Detroit? And something you and I have talked about a lot, Keller's given up more power this year than he has last year, which was miraculous. Are we finally starting to see the real Brad Keller start to show his face? Multiple home runs in in 3 of his last 9 starts. That's a lot given how good he suppressed power before. Like, are we starting to see some normalizing here of his numbers? Because it wasn't normal how well he limited or prevented runs given that he isn't that good.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was pretty crazy before, but like even his overall numbers this year, he's allowed a 154 ISO to righties, a 156 expected ISO. So that's, where it should be. 145 expected ISO to lefties, 126 actual. So, still a really good expected number there. I think he's just good at getting ground balls. He's good at limiting power. He isn't a great pitcher, and he's not worth paying 8K for, I don't think. But yeah, he's just still not someone that I really look to pick on, especially with a team like the Tigers that has no good hitters.
No, I'm fine with that. I guess all I'm saying is that much more recently we've seen things turn for the worst when it comes to Brad Keller. Like, for example, 1.7 home runs per 9 over his last 10 starts. And the ISO he's giving up is pretty significant considering how much he had done to limit power before. So what I'm saying is I think that, first of all, the Tigers just aren't good hitters, but I wouldn't be surprised to see more, big performances against Brad Keller going forward, especially given his very low K rate. All right, let's talk about the next one on the list. We've got Miami. We've got Atlanta, Julio Teheran, and Caleb Smith. Do you agree that if Teheran was priced reasonably, he'd be maybe the chalkiest pitcher on the slate? Like if he was 7,300 on DraftKings?
Yeah, and we just got an ownership update, and Teheran was one of the pitchers I was most interested to see what happened with his ownership.
He was at 7% on DraftKings specifically before.
Yeah, he's at 14 now.
Oh, he's doubled?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's more in line. Like my guess this morning was 15 to 20%.
I said the same thing. Yeah.
People love taking guys against Miami.
Well, look at same with Keuchel, man. And Keuchel's a lefty.
23% owned yesterday.
What's up?
He was 23% owned yesterday.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's crazy. And the thing is, you can see it coming. Like, these guys, as long as they're not utter gas cans, people will pay 88, 9K for a Dallas Keuchel or Julio Teheran. But I think what you were getting at is if Julio Teheran was actually going to be 5 or 7% owned, you might have been willing to pay for him. Is that what you were getting at?
Yeah, just because, it is still a good matchup against Miami. It's still a really good park. Teheran's not a good pitcher, and he's priced for this matchup, which is why, he still projects well for me because of the park and the matchup, but I don't think I'll get to a lot of him. I think that he's probably a little bit better play today than Keuchel was yesterday, because yesterday we had John Gray and Madison Bumgarner at the same price point as Keuchel, so I didn't really see Keuchel making a ton of sense. But here, you have Darvish, who I think is okay at that price point. Teheran's overpriced, but like the options around them really aren't that appealing if you end up in this price range.
No, I think that's a good point. And also, like, I do put some weight into right-handed pitching against them, just given how many righties are in the lineup. Even their active roster, I haven't taken the actual lineup today, but it's pretty similar to what we've seen. The active roster has the 5th highest strikeout rate against righties this season, Adam, and we know that they're bottom 3 in all of the other, WOBA, WRC+, ISO. Against lefties, they have like the 16th highest, or no, 17th highest. So it does make a difference to me. And I think Teheran, on top of what you're talking about in terms of guys being priced around him, I think Julio Teheran is also just a better play than Keuchel was yesterday, even if we took the other options away.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I don't want it to sound like I think Teheran's any good. Like the guy's a 21% strikeout percentage against righties. But, it just is more favorable, I think, being a righty against this team, like you said. And there's just not a lot of talent really around him.
The way I see it is like when irrespective of matchup, guys like Walker Bueller and Strasburg and Bieber, and Sale like yesterday, same with Clevenger, great start yesterday. Irrespective matchup, those guys can have phenomenal performances against really good teams, right? We've seen it. We know that's the case. And that's why, you specifically are so willing to. I know you had a good day over the weekend, and that was because you played two really. I think it was Bieber and Clevenger. You played at super low ownership in tough spots. Now, Julio Turner is one of those guys where I need the matchup to be good. And the Marlins are one of those teams where not any pitcher, but most pitchers facing the Marlins at least have the upside because they're so bad. So,
right. Yeah. And like, if you just, going back to the point about who's around them, for me, he projects similarly to Darvish, but I have him projecting better than, Miley, Stroman, Keller, Smeltzer, Reed Foley, Johnson, Beeks, like all these pitchers that are even remotely close.
Now, I talk about, matchup not being it's a big deal, but I think what the big thing is matchup and ownership. So if it's a tough matchup and it drives the ownership through the floor, then it makes them a whole lot more appealing as opposed to it being a really tough matchup and everyone's still on them. Chris Sale yesterday being an exception, of course, but you know where I'm going with that. What about Caleb Smith in a very tough matchup against the Atlanta Braves? Good park, but he has struggled with some power this season, mostly outside of Miami. But this Atlanta team is pretty terrifying against left-handed pitching.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the lineup, it's not the most intimidating lineup, going by names. Like,
the bottom isn't.
Right, you get to the number 5 hitter and you start with Adam Duvall and then Culberson, Flowers, and Inciarte. But there's still power there. Duvall clearly still has the ability to hit home runs. Flowers has been an above-average hitter against left-handed pitching. Culberson isn't bad in this platoon split either. So I still think it's a scary matchup. Still not a ton of high strikeout percentages. Josh Donaldson since last year is at 28.8% and Flowers is at 27.3%. Other than that, there's no one in the starting lineup other than the pitcher that is even at 23%. So it's just a really, really scary spot for Smith. And I think that while you can obviously make the case for him because of ownership and because it's a good park, and he does have one of the higher strikeout percentages on the slate. The thing for me is that, and you kind of mentioned him in passing already, is that Shane Bieber is also projected for really low ownership. I think he's even better than Smith. So if I want to go to a risky, really good pitcher in a tough spot, I would lean toward Bieber.
I'm actually excited to get to that game because I think we both have a lot to say on him. But look, Caleb Smith, very good pitcher. You mentioned one of the highest strikeout rates on the slate. Number 1 through 5, if you're looking at K rates on this slate, they're only separated by 2%. Like Robbie Ray leads the slate in K rate, and Walker Bueller is 5th, but they only separated by 2%. So like we all know that those guys get a lot of strikeouts. 31 to 30 to 29% isn't that big of a deal. So you're going to have to make the decision somewhere else. Do you have interest in hitters here?
Not a lot. The Braves on DraftKings are pretty reasonably priced. You've got Acuna below 5K for, I think, the first time in a while. Yeah. Donaldson's cheap.
Just as a complete, what's up?
Yeah, Albies is a good play too.
As a one-off low-owned guy with power.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, I can see getting to Atlanta as like a low-owned stack, but I don't think they're a team that my night will really be revolving around. And from Miami, I think that Diaz batting second is a decent value option.
Agreed.
But outside of that, nothing really there.
Yeah, Diaz is the only guy I was considering too. But if you're looking at one or two Atlanta bats from the right side, I don't mind it. Although the fact that this game is in Miami definitely takes some shine off because Caleb Smith has done a significantly better job of limiting power at home this season, and it makes sense. It actually makes a lot of sense. 14 of 18 home runs on the road.
Yep.
New York Mets, Washington Nationals, Steven Strasburg, Marcus Stroman. Stroman making, his second start since being traded or his third? I guess it doesn't matter.
It's his second.
Second, right? Anyway, talk to me about Strasburg because he's another one of these Ray, Bieber, Smith, Walker Bueller. You could throw Strasburg into the mix. 5 guys, if you just use DraftKings, priced above 10K. And his ownership actually came down a bit. So what you're seeing is, and you can check out these ownership projections on awesomeo.com. Use the code DEEPERDIVE, one word, all one word, when you sign up to get 50% off your first month of Awesomeo Plus subscription to get the ownership, top stack tool, projections, Fantasy Cruncher add-on, and all of the other stuff we reference throughout the show, and a lot of great stuff that we don't talk about throughout the show that is on the site. Deeper Dive is the sign up code to get you 50% off your first month at Awesemo Plus. Strasburg was up around 25% earlier. Now you have Bueller, Strasburg, and Bauer all projected for identical ownership on DraftKings. What's that say to you?
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting, and I don't think that it's incorrect. Like, I have Bueller projected higher than Strasburg, but he is more expensive. I think that getting around 20%, 20 to 30% is probably where I would guess I end up coming in on Strasburg.
The Bauer one is the only one that still surprises me, man.
Yeah, like I think I'll be underweight on Bauer. I wouldn't be surprised if like all of the Bauer projected ownership for me just becomes Shane Bieber.
Right. No, and by the way, well, you know what? I'll save it for that game. Just load up.
Yeah.
Load up. Put it in the hopper. So Strasburg for you. Let's go ahead and do this. You got Bueller, you got Strasburg, Bieber, Bauer, Smith. Pretty similar pricing everywhere. Like on DraftKings or FanDuel, it's Bueller, Strasburg, Bieber, Bauer, Ray. Ray's 9,800. We'll consider him up there. And of course, you have Caleb Smith up there as well at 9,500. Of the five, though, of the Walker, Bueller, Strasburg, Bieber, Bauer, and Smith, where do you rank Strasburg for cash and for tournaments? Because I think he's a pretty solid cash play today, too.
Yeah, for cash, I would have him second. I have him projected for the second most points out of any pitcher on the slate behind Bueller. For tournaments, I would put him either second or third. Again, right now the ownership between him and Bueller is the same.
Right.
And I do have Bueller as a better point per dollar option. I would lean Bueller. But then Bieber being at 2% owned, I think kind of put him ahead of Strasburg for me because I have Strasburg projected for less than a full point more than Bieber. I have them reaching their target scores like almost the same percentage of the time. So that ownership gap is pretty huge.
And look at the very small gap on FanDuel. Strasburg 13, Bueller 12, Bauer 10, Caleb Smith 9.
Yeah, that's to me like Bueller and Strasburg should just have more ownership there.
I would agree. What about you playing any Stroman?
No, he just doesn't get enough strikeouts for me at that price tag. It's really similar to Tehran. Like if Tehran were facing the Nats, I would have zero interest in him. And if Stroman were facing the Marlins, I would suck it up and have a little bit of interest.
I would probably have a lot more interest in Stroman against the Marlins than Tehran, just because I think he's a better overall pitcher.
Yeah, that I definitely agree with. Really, really good ground ball stuff. Really good at limiting barrels. He has one of the lowest barrels per batted ball percentage in the league. So I do agree. Like he's a much, much better pitcher than Tehran. But as far as DFS upside goes, they're pretty similar.
Yeah, no, I can see that for sure. The only benefit with Stroman is, well, you know what? No, looking at innings. Well, was Stroman out at all this season? I don't think so. No, it's fun, dude. Yeah. Him and Tehran, as you compared them, Tehran's pitched one more inning than Stroman this year. One more inning.
Did they make the same amount of starts? Stroman was definitely on the injured list.
That's the thing. Tehran has made 24 starts and Stroman's made 22. But even factor that in, it's not the biggest difference. Like it's not a huge difference in terms of how deep these guys are pitching into games. But do hitters appeal to you at all in this one?
Not really. I have a ton of respect for Stroman. I have a ton of respect for Strasburg. Two, decent offenses, but I just don't really see myself getting here.
I'm with you. All right, you ready to move on to Cleveland, Minnesota?
Yep.
So I think we've teased it enough. Shane Bieber went from 3% to 2% on DraftKings. And if you're wondering, maybe you're thinking, well, that's because he's like way more expensive than everyone else. No, he's $800 cheaper than Bueller, $300 cheaper than Strasburg, and only $500 more than Bauer. On FanDuel, you've got Shane Bieber at 10.7, basically the same pricing gap between Bueller and Strasburg. A little bit more expensive than Bauer, not a lot. 0.3% on FanDuel right now, 0.3%. And then on our sponsor Yahoo, 2%. So Bieber, you could very much make the argument that he is the best pitcher on this slate. Now, forget about matchup for a second. You could easily make the argument that Bieber with, the lowest whip, highest strikeout rate, highest swinging strike rate. I know you have more on him. And another thing that I find interesting is if you look at the pitchers, because we're talking upside here, it's not a good matchup and it's low ownership. Pitchers with the most 30-plus fantasy point games over the last 3 months, here are the guys that have more of them than Bieber. Verlander, Garrett Cole, Max Scherzer, and Charlie Morton. Or no, not even Morton. They both have 6. So Cole, Verlander, and Scherzer are the only pitchers with more 30-plus fantasy point performances than Bieber over the last 3 months, to kind of give you an idea of what type of upside he has.
Yeah, he's ridiculously good, and it's not like he's just dominated good matchups either. He just had a complete game, 8 strikeouts against the Angels. He went 7 innings with 8 strikeouts against Houston. He had a 6 1/3 inning, 9 strikeout performance against this Minnesota team.
Mm-hmm.
He's certainly taken advantage of games against like the Orioles and the Tigers, but he's gotten it done against pretty much everyone. He has the best K-BB percentage on the slate, as I think you mentioned, second best strikeout percentage behind Robbie Ray. One thing that I think is really interesting here, though, and probably goes overlooked, so no Nelson Cruz in the lineup, which Josh and I talked about it this morning. And while obviously Cruz not being in the lineup makes the lineup less likely to score runs, it did take a high strikeout percentage out, but he was replaced by Jake Cave. So if you look at this lineup, Kepler's a tough strikeout, Polanco's a tough strikeout. Miguel Sano jumps up to 3rd. Since last year, he has struck out 37.5% of the time against right-handed pitchers.
Great point.
Rosario's a tough strikeout. Gonzalez since last year is at 23.5%. Arias is like impossible to strike out. But then since last year, Crone's at 24. Castro's at 30.2 and Cave's at 30.5. So there's 3 hitters in this lineup with 30+% strikeout percentages. Crone's at 24, Gonzalez is at 23.5, and you're missing the best hitter in Nelson Cruz. So it's still not an easy lineup, but it's about as favorable a spot as Bieber's going to get, and people just aren't going to roster him. So if he's like basically in any matchup, I think if he's 2 or 3% owned, it's profitable to just be overweight on him in tournaments. And then this, I don't even think is that bad of a matchup.
So tell me this much. Of any iteration we've seen of Minnesota this year, of Minnesota's lineup, where would you rank this one for an opposing pitcher, like opposing righty like Bieber?
Probably as much upside as any of them.
For sure.
Like it's still not easy. Arias doesn't strike out, and he's been good at producing, not a lot of power.
Kepler's turned into an elite hitter. Yeah.
Yeah, Polanco's a really good hitter. But, it's still there's more strikeouts. Normally, the Minnesota lineup has guys that don't really strike out and they hit for power, or, or at least, it's Nelson Cruz instead of like Jake Cave.
You can't deny or overlook that Minnesota's a good team against righties particularly, but just overall, the biggest thing here is if you're telling me that I can get one of the league leading pitchers in almost every fantasy relevant category at negligible ownership, when Trevor Bauer against the Cubs, a Great American, is going to be 20%, I don't really know how you can have interest in that.
Right. And even if you wanted to step back and just look at, run totals, the Twins are at 4.3, which, that's pretty healthy against Bieber, but it's not that high overall. It's lower than the Cubs. The
by
Mets
a lot.
Are at 3. Yeah, it's a lot lower than the Cubs. The Mets are at 3.9. The Dodgers, Robbie Ray's getting like 13% ownership. The Dodgers are at 4.4. Like the only team much, much lower than Minnesota, for these aces is the Diamondbacks for Bueller.
For sure. And by the way, sorry, I thought the Cubs were at 4.9 earlier. What are they at now?
4.7.
4.7. Okay, so yeah, it's a decent amount. I had them at 4.9. But yeah, 4.7, 4.3 for Minnesota, and plus just the ridiculous ceiling that Bieber has.
Right. It's I don't think there's any reason to go there in cash, but in tournaments, I love the guy.
Yeah, no, to me, Bueller and Strasburg in cash, if you're paying up, or which you probably should, are the 2 guys that I would want.
Smiley's like my first pitcher in cash.
But here's the thing for me, just to kind of take it one step further, get your opinion. If you told me that Bauer and Bieber in their respective matchups were going to be the exact same ownership, I'd still want Bieber.
I have Bieber on DraftKings projected for 1.4 points more than Bauer.
Right. So like the ownership's just the icing on the cake if you're going him over Bieber. What about the bats here against Devin Smeltzer?
Yeah, I think Cleveland's pretty interesting. They added some power to the lineup. Lindor, Mercado, Puig, Ramirez, Roberto Perez, Reyes, all right-handed bats that have power against Smeltzer. Not great numbers for him so far this season. He's coming off of a really good start, but overall, a 16.9% strikeout percentage, 205 expected ISO against right-handed bats. Not a lot of strikeouts in the Cleveland lineup. Plenty of good hitters. They're affordably priced. I could see them maybe going a little bit overlooked because of how much people are going to want to play the Yankees and the Red Sox and possibly the Astros in those first few games.
Another thing that's kind of interesting about Smeltzer, he doesn't allow a lot of runs, right? Like in terms of run prevention, he's pretty good, but he has been giving up a lot of home runs. And it's kind of interesting because he look at his, even in AAA this year, he allowed 10 home runs in 60 innings, and then already 5 in 27, like almost 1.6 home runs per nine at the major league level. I think we'd be all right with that. Give up some home runs. You don't have to allow 10. You want to give me 5 of them on 3 home runs, I'd be okay with that too. But obviously you prefer more. I just think it's interesting that while he hasn't been terrible, he is allowing some power. And didn't he allow 4 home runs in a start?
I don't remember.
He did, and it was 4 home runs and 5 runs against the Cleveland Indians.
There you go.
How about that? Gonna happen again.
Yeah, clearly.
All right.
It's not like it's a gas can, but it's still a high upside spot for Cleveland.
Right. Texas, Milwaukee, Gio Gonzalez, Colby Allard. Honestly, in today's deep dive, which was kind of a pain in the ass to write just because there weren't any clear-cut amazing options, and then there were just a lot of guys that were kind of in play. I actually had some interest in Gio, not because I think he's fantastic. I don't, but he's got a pretty average K rate. Texas against lefties has struggled, second highest strikeout rate in the league behind only the Mariners. And Gio's done a good job of preventing power, getting enough ground balls, which will help him at Miller Park. I don't think it's the craziest idea, if you didn't want to go all the way down to the bottom to some of the names we'll get to shortly, that Gio could be in play here. And he's a big favorite. And one more thing, I think it might surprise you to see that the implied total for the Rangers opened at 4.5. It's below 4 right now, Adam. It's at 3.9.
Yeah, I think Gio is actually a pretty reasonable option. It just feels better paying $7,300 for Gio than it does paying $8,800 for
no doubt
for Tehran.
No doubt.
Gio's 36 on Yahoo, which is $4 less than Tehran is. It's an affordable price tag. It's a park downgrade for Texas, and it's a really bad lineup. If you go and look at who's in this lineup, since the start of 2017. Elvis Andrus has a 100 WRC plus against left-handed pitching, 13.9% K percentage. That's the most productive hitter on the team. Behind that, you have a 33% strikeout percentage for Santana. Pence is a low K guy. The Shields is at 23.4, Calhoun 24.1, Forsythe 23.5, Odor 25.7, Mathis 30.2, and all those guys are below 100 WRC plus. And then you also get the pitcher in the lineup here. So I do think it's a pretty appealing spot for Gio, and I'm normally not a big Gio fan.
Yeah, I normally have no interest in him at all, but I don't always, I don't use Vegas for everything, but a sub 4 run total at Miller Park for Texas, that's really low.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
What are your thoughts on these Brewer bats? 5.7 run total, minus 200 on the money line.
In our ownership this morning, I thought that they were over-owned. I'm trying to look now to see where they've ended up at. Kobe Allard is not like a finished product right now. He's not really anything special. He is talented. He does potentially have a future. Their ownership's come down a bit. Like this morning, Grandal was 27% on DraftKings. Now he's down to 19. The only hitters on DraftKings above 10% or at 10% or higher are Grandal, Kane, and Keston Hiura. So that does make me like the Brewers more than I did this morning. I think that it's a high upside spot against a lefty that doesn't miss a lot of bats, and you do have a lot of power in this lineup. It's just that when they were projected for a ton of ownership, I kind of thought that it wasn't completely warranted.
Makes sense to me. Do you want to touch on anything else, or should we move to St. Louis?
I think that's it. Like Grandal, if you're not paying down at catcher, I think that Grandal's probably the best mid-range cash option.
All right, cool. St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Dakota Hudson, Chris Archer. Chris Archer made his way into the deep dive today as well, Adam. And quite frankly, I was a little bit surprised that his ownership was as low as it is. I thought Archer would actually be more popular. Right now, he's actually come down to only 10% on DraftKings. Almost the same ownership, 7% on FanDuel, which is crazy given that it's a single pitcher site. And then Chris Archer over on Yahoo is, where's he at? Where you at, bruh? 9%. Look, I'm not saying it's a spectacular matchup, but it's also not horrible. Marcell Ozuna being back, Matt Carpenter being back certainly takes away from this spot, no question. But do you put any stock into the fact that Archer, has the 7th highest strikeout rate on this slate, and as far as he's priced, there are a lot of pitchers that are priced above him, including Smeltzer, Reed Foley, Brad Keller, Brian Johnson, and Jalen Beeks.
Yeah, like I think that it wouldn't be surprising for me if I got to like the 10 to 15% range on him. It's not that I feel good about him or I really like him. It's just that the strikeouts are there, like you said. The problem is that he has a double-digit walk percentage and he gives up a ton of home runs.
Yep.
And getting Carpenter and Ozuna back in the lineup puts a lot more home run power in there for the Cardinals. I don't think that it's surprising they have a 5 implied run total. It looks hot and relatively humid in St. Louis. Park downgrade for Archer as well. So certainly don't love Archer here. He projects pretty similarly to Gio for me, but the strikeout percentage does make him a little bit more appealing in tournaments just because his ceiling just skews a little bit higher than the guys priced around him. So I don't expect to get tons of Archer. I certainly hope that I don't. I don't think he comes through a high percentage of the time here, but I do think that the strikeout percentage, when you look at the list of pitchers around him, makes him somewhat appealing in tournaments.
That's really all it was for me. But it definitely doesn't help that these guys got healthy. Let me flip the question. Do you like the Cardinals here, knowing that Archer's home runs problem has been like a serious issue all season long?
Yeah.
25 home runs on the season for Archer.
I don't think he's had a start yet this year where he didn't give up a run.
A home run, you mean? Or a run?
A run.
Oh, okay.
I don't think he's just had any shutout starts.
Yeah, I don't think so.
But yeah, so I mean, Carpenter being back, obviously he's been terrible this year, but it's still a proven hitter. Ozuna being back is a big-time power threat. And then you get a really strong shortstop option in the Young and a good first base option in Goldschmidt. I don't know how much full stacking I'll get to here, but I do think there are guys that probably come in at pretty low ownership that you can use to fill out some rosters as one-offs that give you a lot of upside.
Okay. Let's keep moving then, because we've still got a few games to get to. Making good time, though, as we always do. Professionals. Dodger. Oh, actually, Pittsburgh bats, Adam?
Not really. Frazier and Bell are affordably priced. So is Colin Moran, I guess. But Hudson is ground ball, not a lot of strikeouts, but ground ball pitcher. Has given up some power to lefties, 199 expected ISO, only 128 to righties. So I would be looking for left-handed bats, and that basically gives me, Frazier, Bell, and Moran as the ones that are reasonably priced.
Okay, Dodgers, Arizona, Walker, Bueller. I guess the question is Bueller worth paying for on this slate? And the answer is yes. I mean, 2nd in WHIP, 3rd in xFIP, 5th in K rate, 1st in walk rate. K rates, like I said, in the top 5, but it's hardly separated much from guys like Ray and Bieber. He also just, Adam, ridiculously high ceiling on Bueller. Of his last 10 starts, he has performances of, these are DraftKings points, 53, not in a row, but here are 5 of his best in the last 10. 53, 52, 41, 39, and 34. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, the upside's very clearly there. It's not the best strikeout spot. The Diamondbacks they've been below average offensively, but not a ton of strikeouts here. Christian Walker's a high K guy, so is Lamb. but not, overall not a ton of strikeouts in this lineup. So that hurts him, and the price tag hurts. But I do have him projected as the top scoring pitcher on the slate. I think that he's where I would like to get to as my SP1 in cash at the very least. And then, whatever I get in tournaments, I'm happy with, because again, he's my top projected pitcher. I think that in terms of preventing runs, it's a really good spot. Arizona has, I'm assuming, the lowest run total on the board at 3.2.
It is the lowest.
Only real issues, again, are the salary and the fact that Arizona doesn't have a lot of strikeouts in the lineup.
Right. Yeah, that's when I said to start the show, like, every one of these guys has at least one aspect where I think, okay, I could like this matchup better than I do.
Yeah. By the way, the Rangers are now down to 3.7.
That's amazing. They opened at 4.5.
Yeah. Milwaukee dropped also to 5.4.
Maybe the roof's closed.
Maybe. I don't know. I haven't called.
Have you been?
No.
Okay. Oh, man. Siri, remind me to call Miller Park at 6 p.m. What about Robbie Ray, by the way, is one of the guys that's kind of going to fall off for me. I know the Dodgers aren't as good against lefties, but he does have the highest K rate on the slate. Are you getting to Robbie Ray? I should just ask you.
If he was projected for lower ownership, I think that I would. I have him projected for less points than that entire top tier, but it's not by a huge margin. He does have the highest strikeout percentage, like you said. So if he were getting, 3 or 4% ownership, I'd probably end up being overweight. But with him getting to right now 13% on DraftKings, I doubt that I get there. The Dodgers aren't as good against lefties, and it makes sense because so many of their good hitters are left-handed. But it's still not a great strikeout spot, and it is still a patient team that walks a lot, which really concerns me, especially on the sites that take away points for WHIP. When you're talking about a guy that has a 10.2% strikeout percentage this year in Ray, that mitigates some of the strikeouts, especially if he's throwing a lot of pitches on his strikeouts. He's also throwing a lot of pitches on his walks. It's just a spot where it can be tough for him to get deep into the game.
For sure. Okay. Let's go ahead and talk about hitters if there's anything you like here. If not, we can talk about Kyle Freeland in this matchup with the Padres.
If AJ Pollock's in the lineup, I think he's a good value option.
Yeah.
That's where my
pretty
interest.
Much it, right? Yeah, he should bat probably third against the lefty.
Probably first.
You think so?
Yeah.
All right, Colorado, San Diego. Kyle Freeland, baby. It ain't pretty, man, but he's 4,800 on DraftKings. Clearly not playing him on FanDuel. It's not pretty. It's not. I mean, even on the road, even outside of Coors, his expected rates, his actual rates, they're still not good. But he is striking out batters at 23.2% away from Coors, which is at least remotely interesting and has me at least entertaining the idea against a high strikeout team in the Padres. But I also like the Padre hitters here. Maybe the best of both worlds. What are you thinking?
I think if Drew Smyly wasn't on the slate, I would get more. I also think if if the Giants game weren't on the slate, I would get more. Like, I have Freeland at about 12 DraftKings points, which makes him a perfectly fine point per dollar option, at 4,800. But I don't think it's a great matchup. Like, the Padres have a ton of right-handed power. Freeland's never been very good at getting strikeouts against righties. And the fact that I can just go to the San Francisco game for a little bit more money makes it so I don't think I'll get to a lot of Freeland, especially because we also have him projected for around 13% on DraftKings.
Yeah. We also have Smyly at like 30.
Yeah, I think I'll be overweight on Smyly.
Really?
Yeah.
All right, we'll talk about it when we get there. Cal Quantrill, any interest?
No.
San Diego Padre hitters. I think you have to have some interest here. Freeland has been a sieve when it comes to home runs this season.
Yeah, and there's plenty of power in this lineup. Tatis is a monster. He's expensive, but beyond that, you have Machado at an affordable price tag. Renfro's relatively inexpensive. You have a cheap second base and catcher in Urias. God, I can't say that name. Or Hedges. I think that it's not the most appealing full stack spot, but either mini stacks or grabbing some one-offs like, Tatis, Machado, Renfro, Will Myers is affordable too. There's just a lot of power here against a pitcher in Freeland that doesn't miss a lot of bats and will give up home runs.
Sounds good to me. And we'll talk about our top stacks at the end of the show. We'll give out, more than just a couple, maybe 3 or so. to get an idea of where we're at, because some pretty appealing teams, even the ones that might not have monster implied run totals, are still pretty interesting. The Padres being one of them. Any Colorado interest?
No, it's just tough because the only guys that you really like are really expensive with Blackman, Story, and Arenado. And then even the rest of the lineup isn't really cheap. So it's not that I think Quantrill's good, but I don't think I really get to Colorado.
All right, this next one. Did you know that the Mariners were playing the Tampa Bay Rays today?
Only because Jalen Beeks is $30 on Yahoo.
Okay. Go ahead. Because I literally have this game. I've forgotten several times that it exists.
Tampa's kind of interesting to me.
Yeah.
I mean, not super interesting. It's like 67 degrees in Seattle, but they're running out, with the exception of Kevin Kiermaier and Austin Meadows, an entirely right-handed lineup. Gonzalez doesn't give up a ton of power, but I think that Jesus Aguilar is a really good value option. Pham, D'Arnaud, and Garcia are all very affordable, power bats too. They're a team where, like, assuming they're going to get very, very little aggregate ownership, I could see me getting a little bit overweight on Tampa.
Okay, fair enough. What about Beeks on Yahoo, just simply because he's so cheap?
Yeah, I mean, I still prefer Smiley, but he's like $30.
All right. Anything else on this game?
And it looks like Beeks is actually starting.
Oh, he is starting. That makes a difference.
Yeah.
That actually makes Beeks pretty appealing. What do you think he throws?
80 plus. So, I mean, he threw
70. I might play him on I might actually have interest on DraftKings if we could get 80s. Maybe not. His price is up there.
I'm not getting there on DraftKings,
yeah,
I don't think. But Yahoo, I could see possibly as like a Smiley pivot.
Like if Beeks was 6,600, I think I'd have plenty of interest.
Yeah. It's just going to be tough for me to get to him over like Gonzalez or Archer.
Yeah, no, I thought he was cheaper than that. All right, San Fran, Philly, Tyler Beede, Drew Smiley. I'll let you go at it here, but I want to point out first that I think this matchup for Beede, and I told you, man, dog shit, the Philadelphia Phillies. Like, what were they finished with 0 runs yesterday? Lost to it. They're terrible. I won't get into it. Point being that they're not that terrible. I just really frustrated with them now. So I make it seem like they're worse than they are. Although a lot of nights they actually seem really terrible. Here's what I'm saying. This could be a difficult spot for Beede because, if this were 3 weeks ago, you wouldn't have Corey Dickerson and you wouldn't have Jay Bruce because he was injured. Now you have Dickerson, who we didn't have before. You have Jay Bruce, who there are strikeouts there, but Beede has been markedly better against righties from a strikeout standpoint. You have Bryce Harper. He does strike out, but again, Beaty's K rate versus lefties has been pretty awful. Maybe he gets more here just because they're high strikeout guys. You have Caesar. I think you'll probably have 4 lefties in this lineup, whereas a couple weeks ago you may have only had 2.
Right. Yeah, I don't think it's a great spot for Beede at all. I think the park is nice. I think that the salary is nice, and there's not a ton of opportunity cost. I like Smiley a lot more than I like Beede, but I'll probably get to some Beede just because I don't know that I need 100% Smiley or anything.
Tell me why you like Smiley so much. Other than the obvious, but if you're going to come in overweight, there's something you really like.
I like the salary. I like the matchup. The Giants aren't the best strikeout matchup, but the park is great. 4.1 implied run total. Smiley's strikeout stuff this year has been there. He's had plenty of issues giving up home runs and walks and everything else. But for the season, he has a 20. As a starter, he has a 24% strikeout percentage. Trying to pull that up now to make sure that I'm right. Yeah, 24.1% strikeout percentage as a starter this year, 4.92 Sierra. But he's been better lately too. The walks have come down. He's made 3 starts with the Phillies, and since getting there, he's cut back on his fastball usage. He's throwing his cutter a lot more. The plate discipline numbers have been really good over those 3 starts. Not that they've been, the worst matchups. He's faced Pittsburgh, he's faced the Giants, and he faced the White Sox. But 15.6% swinging strike percentage against the Pirates, 10.7 against the Giants, 11.8 against the White Sox, 40% chase percentage against Pittsburgh, 44 against Giants, and 36 against the White Sox. It's just that I think his price tag is really low. I have him projected as like middle of the road raw points on this slate, and he's coming in as one of the cheapest pitchers. So I'm going to just keep going right back to Smiley.
All right. Any bats?
Not really. The park's just so bad. Like if I got to anywhere, it would be the Phillies, particularly their lefties, but there's just so many hitting spots on this slate that
for
don't
sure.
involve Oracle.
Also, do you anticipate Smiley being your most or highest owned pitcher?
Yep.
You do? Okay.
Yep.
And what do you think you'll have of Tyler Beede?
Probably around the field, if not less.
Okay.
I anticipate Smiley being in my head-to-head lineups. I anticipate him being my highest owned tournament pitcher.
Got it.
On DraftKings, not and like on Yahoo, not on FanDuel, obviously.
Hey, if you enjoy the show, hit us with a thumbs up. That thumbs up button that likes the video underneath. It helps us out a lot. And we appreciate you very much helping the channel out, helping Adam, myself, and the site out. Something as small as hitting that thumbs up does a lot for us, so we appreciate it. Subscribe, hit the notification bell as well, so you always know when new content's going to drop. Before we head out and hand the keys over to Jake and Spags, Jake, Harry, Chris Spags, live before lock, going up to 7:05. Let's close it out with our top stacks. Adam, who you got?
Houston's still looking like they're going to be really under-owned, so I like them.
God, they're so expensive.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough. Like, you're looking at like Smiley Beede lineups or something.
I love them too. It's just, man, they're expensive. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know how much I'll get to, but I really like the idea. Like, we have them with the highest top stack percentage on DraftKings and only 7% aggregate ownership. So that's really appealing. I like Boston and I like Kansas City.
All right. Yeah, you're right. Half the ownership of the actual top stack percentage. But, man, like Springer on DraftKings, 56, Alvarez, 57, Bregman, 54, Correa, 53, Altuve, 53, even Gurriel, 5,000.
Yeah, I'm clicking in because I haven't crunched anything yet, but I'm clicking in now just to see like how much money I have left over if I play the guys that I actually want to play. You get like 4,500 per position if you go 1, 2, 4, 5, 6.
With what pitchers?
None yet. 4,500 pitchers. So you get if I go like Beede and Smiley, I have like 3,866 left for 3 positions.
I did Bieber and Freeland with 4 Astro bats, all of them above 5,300. You have $3,100 per players remaining, which you know what that means, right? That means you're going to have a lot of Max Stassi.
As I was going to say, it means that there's a large percentage of Max Stassi.
Exactly. All right. Anything else, man?
And Ryan O'Hearn, Houston stacks. No.
Oh, I like that. We'll be back on Monday. Enjoy the weekend. Check out Awesemo Radio, too, a Sirius XM Fantasy, Sirius 210 XM87. It's myself, Manny Laura, 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time, every Saturday, every Sunday. We got great shows coming up tomorrow. If you're getting ready for your drafts, you're getting ready for some DFS football, we're going to talk football. Pigskin, 2 straight hours, Saturday and Sunday. All right, Jake Harry, Chris Spags coming up next, live before lock. Good luck tonight. We'll catch you back here after the weekend.